if you can automate at a high level and generate even far less revenue, if your expenses are low enough, the profit margin is there, and it works.
One, two, three, four.
Welcome to the Automated Lawyer Podcast. I am one of your hosts, John Fritz, and I'm joined with my co-host, Dan Schnurbusch. Dan, what's going on today?
Morning, John. Just settling back in. We got the kids off to school for the first time in 3 weeks or whatever it is now. We had people outside of St. Louis probably didn't. There are others that got this, but we got the Snowpocalypse. I'm sure you got some as well. In St. Charles, we got about a foot, and then we got 3 more inches or so a couple of days later. So we've been pretty good and buried in, and the school's been off for a week. So now the house is empty for the first time in quite some time.
It feels amazing.
Yeah,
it feels amazing to get back into the routine. Yeah. Obviously this, we probably got hit with a little bit less than St. Charles, but not a whole lot less. But yeah, we had, 2 weeks off for, the Christmas break from schools. And then we had the snow, which then created basically another week of kids off from school. So coming back and today, getting the kids to school, actually going to school again, and starting that routine again has been really wonderful for the brain, I think.
Yeah. And it's so weird. I've been on like TikTok and Instagram, and as long as TikTok, we'll see if it's going to be around in a week. But not looking good. We'll see. But it's such a weird contrast to see what's going on in California with the fires while we're so got so much snow here. Thoughts and prayers out to our California listeners out there. I can only imagine what is, I hope everybody's safe, but it is. I don't know if you've seen those videos, John. Have you seen those? What's going on over there?
Yeah, I've seen the videos, and I've seen a lot of like time lapse videos now too that are coming out of different cameras that are showing kind of the progression and devastation, and it's unbelievable. It's a terrible thing that's happening out there.
I've never seen anything like it. It reminds me of like some of the videos I've seen. Reminds me of like some kind of doomsday video or something. You're looking over the whole horizon. It's just orange, and you're like, this is really freaky, really, really terrifying. But so stay safe out there, folks. But anyway, so it's been an interesting several weeks. Today we're going to talk about, we're going to try and cover a couple of interesting topics. We talk a lot about automation and process improvement and AI. And I got an interesting piece of feedback from my paralegal a couple of weeks ago. She was like, sometimes, I'm afraid to push a button or something because I don't know what's going to happen next. And because there's so many things. Now, she does a wonderful job of, taking it in stride and figuring it out and dealing with it. But especially for larger teams, I could see that being utterly crippling. Like if you don't know what's going to happen, and even if you do know what's going to happen, remembering every time, like, oh, okay, this. So I've been thinking a lot about organization and how do we document. Number one, how do we document the process in a way that people are actually going to use and read and understand? I think a lot of people are, write these giant books of process manuals. And it's like, does anybody actually read those? Like other than the first time they join your firm? Like I'm going to bet probably
not even, they probably don't even read it the first time they join your firm. The first page, and then they set it aside and go to something else.
Yeah. And so how do we represent this stuff in a way that's actually usable and helpful? And I think I've been making some progress on that. So I think there's some interesting stuff we're going to talk about today on process and how do you identify when to do stuff and that kind of thing. But what are your thoughts on that, John? So how do you organize this when you've built these tools and all these automations? How do you keep your head around it, and how do you help somebody else get their head around it?
I guess, yeah. I mean, when it comes to, I think that there's, kind of user automations that the user kind of has input to be able to trigger, right? Whether it's a button, whether it's moving a deal in Pipedrive from column to column, right? I think it is important for them to know exactly what's going to happen when they do those things, right? So, I mean, and then you have all your kind of back office automations, all your make connections, Zapier connections, all the stuff that just happens automatically where there's no input, basically, right? There's really no, they might push a button to create that, but a lot of times it's just driven based upon things happening that are, not dependent on your employee, right? Whether a rep agreement signed, then it creates a new file or it creates a customer in QuickBooks, all these little things that happen behind the scenes, right? So I think I think it makes sense to document all of them just so you as the kind of the person who pulls the levers or pushes the buttons, from the creator, right, knows where everything is and what's happening. But I think it also is really important to, just document what's going to happen when we do this particular task for that role, right? So like I did that for my intake specialist in Pipedrive, and I created basically, a spreadsheet that would actually mirror the columns within Pipedrive, right? So our specific columns, and then it basically says in each column, when you drag to this column, this is what's going to happen, right? So they know that, hey, this is going to send an automatic text message and an email. This is going to do this. This is going to do that. That way, if they drag over there, and maybe we don't want to text and email this client, maybe we drag it to a different column instead of that particular column. So I think there's ways to document it. I don't know if that's the best way to do it, but that's what we started with.
Well, that's an interesting idea. I hadn't considered that, of like creating a system that mirrors the pipeline stage. Like, 'cause I think that intuitively makes a lot of sense. We've tried to tackle it in a couple of different ways. So like one of them is that, in Airtable, you have a lot of flexibility as to like what you actually include on your interface. So I've tried to, have like button descriptions. You can write button descriptions that are attached to a property or whatever that like explain what it is and what's supposed to happen. Sometimes we'll have just like text boxes on screen that's like, if you push this button, here's what's going to happen. Or confirmation boxes and things like that help. But because that's been my kind of thinking on it, is so much, because I think 2 years ago, I built a huge like wiki repository of here's how to do everything in the firm kind of stuff. And I spent a lot of time on it. And the software let me track like how often people were looking at them. And it was almost never like,
Yeah.
a lot of time building, and almost never was anybody looking at any of this stuff to ask for guidance. And it just occurred to me that like having these kind of like books and stuff off to the side of how to do things, it can be helpful, I guess, in moments of need. But really the best way to do it is to, have something that they can look at quickly, or that's, and exactly mapped to what you're doing or built into the software that you're actually using. So that it's right there. I've been trying to focus more on doing that kind of stuff. But it's a process. It's a process of getting that working in a way that actually helps people.
Yeah, because you can definitely build, obviously, what you think is the end solution, right? When it comes to this is going to be great, everybody's going to use it. But, then you're like, hey, nobody's using it, like you said, right? So it's, maybe it's not the greatest, maybe it's something that, I think, having feedback from the employees is important, right? Because, our brains are in different places than the employees' brains when it comes to automations and, use cases, right? I'm a very visual learner, just a very visual person in general. So I like to be like, I'm looking on my wall right now. I have that Pipedrive automation on my wall right now, printed out, so that people can, my intake specialist could use that as a visualization. I think it is important also because you can't visualize everything. And when you get really complex, right, in processes, you can't just have a printout on your wall of everything because it's just too much. But, I would throw out the idea of using like your custom GPT for your firm, right? Just upload these documents, create the actual workflows and documents, upload with the GPT. And then instead of them having to, they can just type a question, let the AI tell the response. Like, hey, what happens when I press a button in Pipedrive or what happens when I drag to from into this column, what happens in the automations, and then it'll just tell you what the automations are. So I think more of a targeted use would be probably most beneficial on asking questions to a database, and then the database, coming up with the answer on your process. And that's
Yeah.
kind of the direction we're going with Eleanor, is not only just legal stuff now, but now systems and processes for the firm, so that anybody can come in and assume a new role and then ask a question to the database and everybody gets the exact same answer.
Yeah. No, that's a great idea, using custom GPTs. And, if you've written out your processes and automations, let's say in a Google Doc or something, as a way of making it more interactive and more usable, uploading that as a knowledge source for,
Yeah.
for your team. The audio listeners aren't going to be able to see this, but I'm going to share my screen here real quick. This is can you see that on the screen there, John?
Yep.
That's this is a tool I've been working with called Whimsical, which is basically just a diagramming software. And it probably looks overwhelming at first glance. But if you zoom in, like let's say we're at the consult stage, the left-hand side are just the stages of the case. And then the right-hand side is just a horizontal, what happens at what step. So like consult, form submit, and I've got them color coded here for client action, automated action, or team action. You can kind of see what happens at each step. You can click into comments. And what my goal is to actually organize automations. So like we have probably 200 plus automations throughout the firm. So trying to actually get them in a one place where, okay, I know at this step, this is going to happen. Here's how I find it. And I can link out to these. So you can see, like, I love Whimsical because I can kind of, brain dump. All right, well, at this stage, it's going to fork and these two things could happen. We can see all the different automations that are happening, what's triggering. Here's a little commented explanation of how it works. You get to the end, you move on to the next stage. All right, well, here's what happens at this stage. Different marketing stuff that's going on. And I encourage people, it still remains to be seen, like how helpful this formulation of the organization is. But so far, I really like it as a way of kind of, getting the ideal flow out. What does it look like? What should be happening in different stages? And I also like the way of color coding, because I can see anything that's white, anything that's a team action. I'm sitting here thinking, well, can we turn that green? Is there a way that we can make that white team action into a green automated action and, and free up, just make that not be something that we have to worry about anymore. So it gives you an interesting visual checkbox of areas for possible process automation. Fun.
I think that's
Pretty-
amazing. I mean, that's a really cool, a cool tool. As you said, it's whimsical.
Yeah. And the thing is, Whimsical's free. I love it. It's just, I've played with a couple of different diagramming softwares. This one is by far the easiest to use. Like you don't have to learn anything complicated. It's just like easy. Like, here's a box. This is a tree diagram, arrow connects to new box.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome like I said, as a visualization person, I was just like kind of blown away by seeing that. Very cool for, your overall kind of general processes on, you have leads and how the deal goes through all the way to the end from start to finish, right? But the first thing my brain did was go to, I want to do that for each SKU that we have as a product, right? When it comes to probate, right? I'll have a small estate affidavit one. I'll have a determination of heirship one. I'll have a full estate without will, right? All these different pieces where you have all these visualizations, and then you can go in and say, here's my diagram for this case. I want to make sure that, here's the different roles, who plays a role, the intake specialist, and then the paralegal, and then the file clerk, and all these people that we have that are doing different things, right? And then, so if there's like hey, what is my role, or how does this work, or how does my role play into this? Especially when you're bringing on new people, right? To the team, to be able to visualize what their role is, what role they play in the overall role. And then, like I said, I love the fact that you have stuff that's green versus white versus team versus the actual automations. Is that, and then you can each month, quarter, or year, you can say, well, do we need to add a role here, or is this role even duplicative that can be replaced with automation?
Yeah. That's what I've been kind of trying to keep in focus too, as as artificial intelligence gets more powerful, is a lot of these steps that are white and traditionally would require human intelligence. I think we're at the point now where you can start genuinely asking, like, can I program an assistant or a GPT that would have the relevant and requisite knowledge to be able to, answer whatever question I thought needed human answering at this stage? And sometimes the answer is no, and that's okay. And sometimes the answer is yes. And I think the major advantage of that is that as we're able to offload more of this to AI, the things that are still white are usually the most important things from the perspective of the client. There are things that involve like talking to them on the phone and collecting information from them, or communicating some, important shift in the case to them that's not merely process. It's something came up or something like that, where it frees us up to be there to communicate with them in a real personal way, which is, I think, cool. I think it's really cool that we can focus more on the person, interpersonal aspect, especially in these highly process-driven firms where it's just like, we need to get stuff done. We need to get documents through. Taking that time to slow down and, ask them about their family. Their loved one passed away. Tell me about them. Like, my paralegal, she has time. Sometimes she'll pull up the obituaries of people who passed and use that as kind of a, touch points with people as we're kind of connecting with them on a more human level. Very cool stuff that can be opened up there as you shift more of the paper pushing onto computers.
Yeah, and just from a not obviously that's obviously super important, and that's really what that's really when it comes to feedback is the number one most important thing to the client, right? When it comes to that 5-star review at the end of the process, or not just even the review, but did they have a great experience with your firm? It's that human to human connection, right? They had a great connection with you. They had a great connection with your paralegal when it comes to providing updates, all that sort of stuff. But I think a lot of the issues with law firms when it comes to not having that great client experience is their lack of communication with the client. When it comes to updates, where am I on the firm? Like, people want to be updated in real time, once a week almost now, like on cases. And if you're an injury firm or even a probate law firm, like we run is, we have a 6-month period where there's not a whole lot of communication, but building in those communications where the client actually doesn't even know that they're automated communications, right? Hey, just checking in, just wanted to see if there's any issues. Like, hey, here's an update. We're still in the 6 months. Here's our date to close. We're going to be able to close. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns. Automate that touch point, right? Then the client can give you a response if there's an issue, and if not, they'll feel good about it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And as I went through this exercise of kind of diagramming and visualizing all this stuff, it actually, the other thing that was interesting is it helped bring to light areas that were not humming as effectively as they should be. Like, I realized, and it was interesting that it coincided with a kind of a malfunction on a case where we had one of our PRs closed out the bank account before probate was over and pulled the cash out. We're like, we didn't tell you to do that. Why'd you do that? And it turned out that the reason was because when I was going through our automations and I realized we didn't have a good closing shift when we're shifting from admin into closing that clearly identifies, now that we're getting started for closing, here's the things that we need. Here's the things you should be doing. Here's the things not to do. We didn't have a clear phase shift there in the closing phase. So some people were coming into it blind unless they were, we had a good conversation on the phone or we, sent an email explaining it. It wasn't happening automatically. And this particular client was one of our older ones that didn't get quite that same transfer experience or that shift experience of being informed about what to do. And so this came out while I was going through the diagramming. I realized I don't have an automation here. There's a missing automation here for something that seems like it pretty well should be automated here. So now we're one of the things I'm going to do hopefully before I leave for Scottsdale is get that running, just so that any any future people that we're shifting into closing, they'll have a clear roadmap, and won't have any confusion. So that's kind of easy low hanging fruit you can kill.
Yeah, and what you just mentioned was, I think, is important. Clearly defining your different phases and making sure the client is aware of each phase, and that there is a closing phase or other phases that are important throughout the process. Telling the client what they should do throughout the process. All lawyers are mostly in tune with that sort of setup, right? We're telling you what to do, at each given step on, giving legal advice, providing instructions to the client. I've found that the instructions on what not to do are just as important, if not more important, than the instructions on what to do.
Yeah.
And then it's like you see these situations where clients, it's not just a one-off. It's like, well, I had 2 clients do this, right? So then incorporating that instruction on do not do this, right? It's like
Mm.
we instruct clients to, for all our full estates, when it comes to anything with stock, brokerage accounts, qualified, anything, we say, you need to basically transfer this into the EIN of the estate, right? And then I incorporated language that says, do not liquidate, do not sell. This could trigger a adverse tax event, right? And because, they see like, oh, transfer in the EIN, they go, oh, then they just, I have clients that just went in and just liquidated everything, right? And put in this, and then the CPA gets involved, and it's like, well, you just triggered a major tax event, and the estate's now going to have to pay the 40% tax rate on this, as opposed to, being passed through to individuals, right? With
Yeah.
individual beneficiaries who may have a, sub 20% taxable rate. So it's things like that where it's providing that extra instruction, but also having that automation to provide that extra instruction, because it's the same thing on each case. Like, do this, do not do this. So that, and then also it's a CYA for yourself as well as a law firm, right? If you're telling them, like, if you ever something comes back on you and they're like, you told us to do this, and it's like, no, I didn't. Here's my automation that told you not to do that specifically, right? Documented throughout the file. So
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good CYA automation. I haven't thought about it this way before, but automation as a CYA is a great point. Making sure that you can't be accused of, forgetting to explain something to them or anything like that. Because sometimes clients, they don't ask; they just do stuff without asking. It's like,
oh, yeah.
what? It's like, they don't. Maybe they don't appreciate the gravity of their responsibilities and stuff, but sometimes they just do stuff, and it is what it is.
They just don't like, there's a lot of clients I've experienced that do not like being told what to do. And I don't, if I would have known that on the front end, then they would have never became clients. But then you have clients who are, there's like, well, or they think they know more than you as the lawyer on what the law is, right? Too. It's like, well, this is how you do, this is how we do it, because this is what's the best route. This is what's actually legal here. And
Yeah.
they come around usually and I'm following it. But, having that paper trail of, making sure that you've documented what, instructions, and specifically do not do this at this time because you think that might happen, right?
Yeah, especially important in probate, particularly because I find that on a fairly regular basis, people are not happy with the intestate distribution. They are not happy to find out that child from, haven't heard from in 30 years is expected to inherit. And I'm like, well, should have wrote a will. but it's not always that easy.
Yeah, that's why we have those right at the initial consultation. It's, well, you're only going to get, 1/6 of this estate, even though you're living in the house and, you've been paying some of the bills, right? So
Those are the worst. Well, very good. Yeah. So it's an interesting, set of issues that pop up when you're going through that exercise. So I highly encourage people to do it. Write it down. What are you doing? What does the ideal process look like? Visualize it if you can. Look at a tool like Whimsical and stuff, and just have fun with it. It's been, for me, very helpful to kind of create hyperlinks into all of our automation, so I know where everything is. If something breaks, I can quickly find it, and figure out, where in the process things are working well and not working well. And I highly recommend it. It's been a eye-opening exercise.
I mean, what you did just
All right.
right now is just create a rabbit hole for me to go down to spend, countless hours on Whimsical, which I appreciate. But you know what? Here's something that I'm kind of struggling with as well. There's a lot of, I mean, my list of like non-legal stuff, like when it comes to automations or, document automation updates or all this stuff is just getting astronomically long, right? On things that I want to do and complete. And it's like, you know, it's because I can do it. It falls in my bucket of like, well, I'll get around to it. But like, I'm coming to the realization is it really doesn't make sense for me to be doing any of that stuff anymore. I mean, honestly, it doesn't. Because it just piles up and piles up and piles up. And I don't want to spend, you know, work all week and then sit on the couch and spend, my hours worth of wind down time at the end of the night, have my computer out to be, killing myself with this stuff. It's like, so let me ask you this question. Where's the best place to find somebody to pay to basically, I could pay somebody to come in and say, okay, give them access to all of our task flows within FileVine, right? It's every single step of the case is mapped out, whose role it is, and then have them just build a whimsical flow chart for each thing, like, or just processes. What would be the best way to find somebody to pay, to kind of help out with these projects? Because I mean, like I said, it doesn't make sense for me to even try to do them anymore.
It's a good question. It's a good question. I'm probably not the person to ask because I'm usually the person that
Because you do them all.
I don't hire people for that kind of stuff. That is my favorite thing to do. So but I would say that, I think there's depends on the platforms that you're using. There are a number of really great people that I've, bumped into over the years. I'm gonna just shamelessly plug. I've had great experiences with Martin Kropchenko, and his organization. They're so flexible and capable. Been really impressed with that in terms of having the brand recognition. Now, I think there's different scales to it too, though. Like you have like large scale projects that I think people like Martin and his organization would be like really, really great at. But then you might need like things on an ongoing basis. They might be good for that. I don't know. But like, I always wonder, some of these things, could you find somebody on like Upwork or Fiverr or something that has, the technical, that if you ask for it and say, hey, you need to know how to do this, you need to know how to do this in your job post, like how likely are you to find somebody that's reliable, that's not, some like scammer from, the Eastern Bloc somewhere? Can you find something that will work well in that role that you could get done at a much more reasonable rate? And then reserving more high level architectural projects, or, we're building out a whole new system, like reserving that for more specialized organizations. It's a great question. And I think it's if anybody's found a great way of finding somebody to do that kind of like, especially smaller projects or one-off projects, that isn't just, that kind of area, it'd be worth a shot. I've also seen a lot of interesting activity on the make.com Facebook groups. Somebody throws out, hey, I need somebody to help me do this or whatever. And you'll get 50 people respond like, oh yeah, you could probably do that this way. Now, a lot of them are just trying to make a buck and they may or may not actually know what they're doing. So you got to figure out how to vet them. And probably when you find a good one, on them for dear life.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe I just need to hire somebody else. Like, just hire a VA, another virtual person that's all they do, right? Is just work on automations and processes and stuff. And like, because it's constant. I mean, every single week. I mean, like, there's something you just showed me, the Whimsical thing. I would love to build that out. I think that's a great piece of tool to have for, building that you're creating the building blocks, and maybe not necessarily for your firm, but I see it as a building block for scalability, profitability, and then building to sell, right? At some point, right? Having all those, when somebody comes in and wants to buy your firm, or you want to sell your firm in 15 years or 20 years, that's something they want to see, right? They want to see all the processes. They want to see everything documented. Very easy to come in, plug a new person in, and run it exactly the way it's running, right? So yeah, I don't know. That's something that I think I will work on. Really thinking about that. Can I use a small time, a one-off project person here and there, or does it make sense at some point just to simply put another person in a seat and just have them do that full time?
Yeah. No, I mean, if you find anybody, let me know. If anybody out there is listening and thinking, "Hey, that's me. I could do that," they reach out to us. We may have some work for you. So, yeah, and it kind of coincide your idea there of having a VA and having them specially trained. It brings to mind, I think we had Joey Vitale on the show a while back, who has his Skybreaker organization and helps people get connected with VAs and train them. And I know Joey's process, kind of when he originally developed his firm and continues to scale, is one of his techniques was hire a VA, pay them to learn how to do something, and then they will be that person for your firm. Like they just have to have the drive and the initiative and the desire to learn that thing. And if you're paying them to do it, and especially when you're working with overseas VAs, like it's not that expensive. Even if they're training for a month, I mean, or 2 months, you're talking about, maybe $1,000 in overhead pay while they're training up on this complicated thing. And it kind of coincides with my tip of the week, which I guess I'll just give now, which is check out the Make Academy. If you're interested in learning like no code automation, Make wrote a free course called Make Academy, and you can just go through it, just video lessons teaching how to use Make at a super high level. I mean, it talks about like bundles and webhooks and custom API calls and like anything you could want to know how to do. There's a video lesson in there, and I'm now thinking like, what if you hired a VA and just said, watch this Make
Seriously.
course twice, and then can you help?
Well,
Can you help too?
I mean, that's an amazing, it sounds like an amazing resource, especially when it comes to the actual, I was talking more about, systems and processes more generally, documenting
Mhm.
those. But obviously, if you want somebody to, and here's the deal. I mean, if you look at, you look at your Facebook group, the, Legal Tech Collaborative, right? You have all these lawyers asking questions about different issues and automations and saying, like, hey, well, like just, what's very basic stuff, right? They're kind of wading into the water now when it comes to automations. Like maybe I should automate, right? At this point in my career in my law firm. Um, but it's really hard to, to even as a lawyer and to assume that new skill set while you're trying to run a firm and do all these things. It's really hard to do it. I mean, I've tried to, and you do it very well, and because you like to do it, right? You love doing it. I also I like the automations. I like the automations working. I like the concept idea and execution, but the actual building is not my passion, right? Building out the connections. Um,
Right.
so if you had a library where either you could go if you want to start there, or like you said, if you have a paralegal, even you don't even need to hire somebody. What if you just had a paralegal or what a staff member right now? You can say, hey, spend an hour a week on learning this stuff, right? And to help me with it, right? And then
Yeah.
eventually they're doing 30, 40% of it, 50% of it, and you're only stuck with 50%. And then you phase them up to 80%, right?
Right.
When
Yeah.
it comes to managing connections.
Yeah, and I think it's just kind of one of those things that I've come to the conclusion on or come to terms with is that if you want to stay small as a law firm owner, and some people do, like I've said, I've become enamored with people like Regina Edwards and the Lawyer on the Beach group, and this idea of having this small firm, and that's what we built is just having this micro team that's heavily supported by technology and automation. But the implication is like, uh, if you're in a practice or you're running a firm and you can afford to, pay consultants to put every little piece together, and there may be cheaper, more effective ways to do it. I just know I've seen some, I've charged some hefty consulting bills. And I know I've seen some hefty consulting bills.
I paid some.
And right. And how far can you go? Yeah, are you really going to want to hire somebody to put together that teeny tiny thing if you can figure out how to do it yourself? But if you don't, that's the problem is if you stay small and you don't do these things, you don't automate, especially admin tasks that are not directly revenue generating, um, you're never going to be able to step away. You're never going to be able to go on vacation and, be assured that everything's going to be okay while you're gone. You're never going to be able to, because everything takes so damn long. Like if you want to send out bills, if you don't have an automated system for sending out bills, assuming you send bills or whatever, that could
Mhm.
be a several hour process that has to be done now, that isn't being done while you're gone. And so if you want to stay small, you got to figure some of this stuff out or find a way to cheaply delegate. So interesting thoughts.
And for me, I mean, I understand the idea of staying small. I think people confuse staying small in a small firm with small revenue and small growth, right? I think but there's a confusion there. I think that, what you're talking about in what Regina Edwards does and all these lawyers who are, building, heavily tech focused law firms, it's not about staying, it's about keeping the number of humans on your team small and not having the traditional law practice model where you're hiring all these people and having, 10 associates and all these, other things. But it doesn't mean that you don't want to increase and grow revenue and scale, right? You can still scale without hiring people. And that's a point that I think people miss, right? Is that you can still add more cases, you can still serve more clients, but you're just not hiring as many people because you have that tech support, right? So you could
Yeah.
probably, with, I want to do with our, 4 team members. Um, I want to do basically what a team of 10 people would do in a traditional law firm, or even
Yeah.
15. Like that's what our focus is, right? So it's keeping the number of people small, but producing results that are what a 10-person team or a 15-person team are doing, traditional non-tech law firm, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And because to me, the thing that I've kind of taken away over the last couple of years is that profit is, at the end of the day, the most important. If you're going to be an owner, like, and deal with the risks of ownership and all that, like, at the end of the day, profit is like what matters, right? Like, because
Yeah.
I won't name names, but I've met the owners and talked to the owners of several, multi 7-figure firms, and some of them are not taking home any more than I am. And it's like,
Yeah.
they're just, they're so, systems are so inefficient. They're so labor heavy and so intensive on people that they're not very profitable. The firms are not very profitable. And the ownership partnership, just isn't able to draw out as much as they might otherwise want to. If you can automate at a high level and, generate even far less revenue, if your expenses are low enough, the profit margin is there, and it
Yeah.
works. And I encourage a lot of people to take that seriously. Like, we hear so much, especially if you're a follower of like Alex Hormozy and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, love him. A lot of great, brilliant business wisdom, but it's only one path. Like, growing this big firm and becoming fabulously wealthy is only one path. Like, you can stay small, but it does require a much higher level of efficiency. And in my opinion, the main way to drive that efficiency is, with automation technology and artificial intelligence. Uh, but it can be done. Can be done.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think that there is a certain level, at least for me, when it comes to building my firm, I think there's a certain like threshold of level of basically of so I started out my firm when I was like, I want I said, this is my client experience, right? This is the level of service that we want to provide. And basically this is what it's going to cost X. Okay. And so there could have been there could have been multiple years where I got paid less, right? Because I wanted to, or I got paid more, I'm sorry, because I wanted to basically, fall short of this experience, this client level experience and building this machine and putting all the building blocks in place and doing all this stuff. Right. And then at a certain point, we hit this point of like, okay, this is where, I don't need to add anything else. Now we have this really great foundation. Right. And it's basically just a giant machine that we're going to keep putting more cases into. And there's going to be tweaks and there's going to be additional stuff in there. But there was a certain level of expenses that I was willing to sacrifice for by
Yeah.
taking less money home because I knew that if I got to this certain level, that the level of experience, that things would move a lot quicker when it comes to, being able to grow and, create more revenue. So, but again, everybody figures out their own path when it comes to this stuff and like an emphasis on figuring it out, right? Because you do have to figure it out on your own, right? You can't just, jump into it and say, I'm going to do this or that. You have to figure out which path you want to go. But anyways, one thing I wanted to mention real quick, we had mentioned it before. It'll be since we're getting close to time, it'll be my tip of the week. I mentioned this offline, but I had this idea and it's not even really my idea. I was listening to Gary Vee audio experience this morning, like I do pretty much every morning or at some point during the day. Gary Vee obviously is a big social media marketing guy, right? Tons of marketing advice. But he was talking about how social media influencers, he said years ago that they were going to replace celebrities as the most followed people on social media, and he was right. I mean, these influencers have completely surpassed people in Hollywood or celebrities, right, when it comes to followers, right? And his next prediction is that that AI avatars will become more popular than the actual influencers when it comes to that, and that they will be the ones that are driving the most comments, reviews, likes, having the most attention when it comes to social media, for a number of reasons. But I thought to myself, well, this makes a whole lot of sense. I could definitely see this happening. So I'm going to build 2 avatars, right, for Fritz Law and start there. And we're going to build. I'm going to start looking into who has the best tech right now for an AI avatar, and then start using them as basically quote unquote community outreach employees or community outreach people, right, who are going to be kind of a new wave of marketing campaign and the faces of Fritz Law in certain digital capacities, obviously, right? But thought it was a really interesting idea. I think it will actually work and be revolutionary. And I think you being able to upload scripts to it. And so instead of having to sit there and shoot videos, you can just upload a script to it or upload content, snip it out. I mean, it's just going to be the possibilities are endless when it comes to a new marketing platform. So consider that, check it out, maybe go down a similar path or not, but I think it's going to be really cool.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see if that prediction pans out. I mean, he's had a good track record of predicting developments. So you do got to take what he says seriously. I do wonder, like, are people going to want that authenticity of human connection? Like, I've always been operating under the assumption that as AI grows, the importance of real, authentic human connection is going to actually develop a premium. But I could be wrong. Like, technology could get so good that you can't really tell the difference. People don't really care. The AI influencer is just as good, and it's covering the topic in just the same way you'd want it to. So we'll see. Especially for like these information-driven social presences, like law firms often have, where we're trying to educate people about stuff in order to develop credibility. Could definitely see it in that kind of context. So we'll have to see. I'm very, very, very interested. Again, I guess I have 2 tips of the week. One would be, again, just check out Make Academy if you're interested in learning the automation technology a little bit yourself. Could be also a good place to find other experts who are working in this space. Again, check out Make's Facebook group. Other people there may be able to help you out if you want to build things through somebody else. Another thing that I wanted to mention too is we had a very cool, without getting into too much detail, we had a very cool post on Reddit a week or 2 ago. There's a couple of guys got defrauded from some crypto company, lost to the tune of millions of dollars, and they are now suing the company. They couldn't find a lawyer because the lawyers all wanted millions of dollars in legal fees to prosecute this case, big financial crimes case. They just decided, well, O1 Pro just came out, we're going to use AI. And so they downloaded all the documents they could possibly find about this company, emails they had with them, all this information, uploaded it to a vector database, gave it to O1 Pro, ended up writing this beautiful 120-page federal complaint. It's now pending in federal court. But the thing that I thought they did was so interesting is they created an AI judge and an AI defense counsel. And they told the AI defense counsel, write, a motion to dismiss that covers as many possible defenses as you could think of to defeat our complaint. And they ran that simulation several times to get a laundry list of defenses. They improved the complaint on the basis of that motion to dismiss. Then they submitted both the dismissal and the complaint to the fake AI federal judge. And they ran that simulation several times. They said, hey, AI judge, what's the outcome here? I don't know exactly how they worded the prompt, but they ran it through the simulation. And they did it over and over and over and over and over until they got it to the point where the complaint never failed. Never failed dismissal. Just a fascinating, and these were not lawyers, by the way. These were untrained, non-attorney people. just a fascinating use for AI that I think a lot of attorneys need to start adopting is when you're working on writing, especially argumentative briefs, run it through AI, see what the possible objections might be from your opposing counsel. Especially helpful if you're not sure what they could be. And, have the model critique your writing. Works especially well with O1 because it has a massive context window and it can also output up to 30,000 tokens. Or actually, I think it's 65,000 tokens, which is about 30,000 words in response. So it can generate very long, comprehensive responses. So cool tip for litigators. Give that a try. Also check out Make Academy. That's it for this week, guys. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, check us out on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a 5-star review. If you want to take the conversation offline, join us in the Legal Tech Collective Facebook group where we talk about this kind of stuff all the time. But that's it for this time. Until next time. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. See you next week.
See you next week.